Good morning, Kathleen Mills, Licensed Professional Counselor Supervisor. How are you?
I am well. How are you, sir?
I'm very good, very good. It's Friday, and I got some sleep last night for a change. You're
Good.
back from the Great White North. You spent a week or so up in Michigan, Upper Peninsula,
and we got home just in time for Canada to have a catastrophic fire and
Yeah.
clogged up all of the UP and the Mackinac Bridge. I mean, it's really bad.
Mm-hmm.
My in-laws are still up there, and she said you can't see the lake. That's how bad it is right now.
Yeah, one of the guys I follow on X, he's been complaining for 3 days about the fires up there, and he's the only one that I see complaining, which doesn't mean it's not there, but it's like, what fire is he talking about? I guess it's on fire. Something's on fire.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, at least I got this Bigfoot out of the deal, so that's a good thing.
Sasquatch. Yes.
And he's got big feet too. This is pretty cool. Yeah, I like that. You know, most people, if they were out in the middle of nowhere on a porch overlooking a lake and there was nobody within 100 miles of them, would relax. Some people read books and research reports. You got caught up, didn't you?
I did.
Yeah.
And it was still restful at the same time, because I got to do what I wanted to do in the middle of nowhere, and I had a stack of stuff, and it was very enjoyable
And
for
there
the
was
most part.
no telephone.
No telephone.
No telephone for you to check anyway.
No television.
Yeah, you got a lot of good. You read the FTC versus WPATH. Yeah, that's the word I'm looking for. Yeah, you read that 123-page document and put together a nice little deck. That's going to be very, very interesting, to say the least. That's a house of cards thing right there.
A huge house of cards, which I don't think there's any survivability, if you will, with the WPATH folks, because they left no stone unturned. And it's pretty damning.
Mm-hmm. WPATH is the absolute evil heart that drives the gender affirming care movement, and
based on the persuasion of the deceptive practices that were all involved and coming up with what was called the standard of care.
You mean they've been lying to people and people got hurt?
Well, and counselors bought into the standard of care, because what have we been taught all this time? The standard of care, it's evidence-based. Well, and they fabricated the evidence that suggested that mutilating someone's body was going to help them feel better. So, the Federal Trade Commission is really going after it very aggressively, and they filed it in Fort Worth, the federal court in Fort Worth, Texas, because UPATH, their corporation papers are here in Texas. They didn't think to change their papers, their corporation's status, when they moved to the state of Illinois. So here we are in a very large red state that just banned gender affirming care on all levels, which includes facilitation by therapists or some others.
Wow. Anyway, so that'll happen. And in fact, we're going to do a deep dive on that next week. That's next week's topic. So it's just you and me and you. It's always been that way. It always will. And we're going to explore.
Maybe we'll even run a slide deck during our talk. Who knows?
We might do that. Today, we're going to talk to a young lady out of Arizona named Katie Kernodle. Katie is a licensed associate counselor. Let me find my notes here. In the great state of Arizona. She's a clinical therapist. Right now, she's working with C-Glass or at C-Glass Mental Health, providing telehealth services to adults in Arizona and Hawaii. She earned her master's degree in counseling for mental health and wellness from New York University. She survived and got out as quick as she could in 2024 and has approximately 2 years of clinical experience. With a relational, alliance-centered approach, Katie integrates psychodynamic, cognitive, behavioral, trauma-focused, and spiritually integrative modalities to help clients explore deep patterns rooted in trauma, PTSD, anxiety, OCD, addiction, and moral injury and depression, and including spiritual or existential concerns. Not only is that a way too long run-on sentence, there's far too many big syllable words in there for me. But she's very thoughtful, curious, and earnest. She's appeared on Ryan Rogers' podcast about a jillion times, so she's a very sharp young cookie, and we're going to talk.
And I believe that podcast, Philip, is called Reality Therapy.
It is indeed. I'll put a link to that in the show notes.
Yes.
Reality Therapy, note to self, keep Ryan happy. All right, there we go.
Yeah.
Okay. What else you want to know about Katie? Because that's all I got.
I'd like to know how far along she is in her associateship before she turns full green light licensed professional counselor in her state.
Well, we'll just make that your very first question, then, won't we? I'd like to know how somebody who's only a year or two out of school is so focused and on the subject matter. I asked her, I said, what are the top 3 things on your mind right now that you'd like to talk about? And she gave me 3 things. And I had to look them all up too.
And she's
So we're
putting
going to do
pieces
that.
together, which I commend her for that. In her young
Absolutely.
career, she's really making sense out of what did I just get stuck with in my profession, and then how to counterbalance it, perhaps for her, and critically thinking about how she wants to do this counseling thing, who to listen to, who not to listen to, understand the historical background of things that has been very much part of our counseling fabric, behind the curtains, but very much forward in our present day of what counselors are being faced with today.
Yeah. Well, she's not your average associate. She's thinking about things that most associates aren't even aware of, much less think about it. So, all right, you hold your horses and we'll be right back and we'll talk to Katie Kernodle. And we're back with Katie Kernodle and Kathleen Mills. Good morning, Katie.
Good morning.
Glad you could make it. Kathleen and I were just cussing and discussing before we hit the go button about, I asked you before we got started a couple weeks ago, I said, what topics would you like to talk about? And you responded quickly and thoroughly and gave me 3 topics, which I wasn't expecting. I had to go look some of this stuff up, Katie. I thought I knew everything.
Well,
My
you sure
goodness.
didn't.
I know I didn't. I do now. I had to pedal faster just to keep up with the smart
like,
girl.
oh.
My goodness. Yeah, we don't need that. So anyway, Kathleen, what you want to jump in here?
Yeah, I'm very curious, Katie, and I mean this very respectfully and lovingly. How in the world did you get into this rabbit hole of what we're about to unpack for us little counselors in the all over the planet here?
Yeah, so well, I did go to New York University. I did go online, so just to clarify, I didn't live in New York, so I was living here in Arizona, fortunately. But it was unsurprisingly a fairly like woke or radical program. And at the time I really didn't know what was going on. So I was just there, I was trying to figure out, I felt like I was kind of dropped into the twilight zone and just felt like I needed to figure out what was going on. That led me to New Discourses, which is James Lindsay's podcast and platform, and it just kind of led me down this pathway of being concerned with communism.
Mm. Well, the 3 topics you gave me, I'm going to read all 3 of them. Then we're going to come back and work on number 1. You responded, the liberation and decolonial psychologies, for one, which are increasingly mainstream, and I'm not sure the average clinician understands how serious they are with respect to the explicit alignment with violence and terrorism. Okay, that grabbed my attention. Then number 2 was the betrayal of our professional bodies, the therapy professions, and the transition to the 4IR well-being economy. At this point, my brain collapsed, and I barely made it to number 3, which is the danger of interstate compact legislation and the general move toward therapists as contractors for big tech, similar to Uber drivers, with tremendous consequences for data. All right, I've got my Tylenol out and my bottle of water, and I'm ready to go. So let's start with number 1 here, the liberation and decolonial psychologies. For those of us who graduated before the turn of the century, Katie, what is colonialization and why is that a thing right now?
Yeah, so decolonizing therapy is very popular. I'd say like at least since 2022. So this was really only coming up even when I was in grad school. It wasn't quite popular yet. But decolonizing basically it focuses very much on things like the DSM, basically positioning like a new form of therapy focused on liberation and like freedom from these various intersecting forms of oppression versus what they would consider to be Western forms of talk therapy. So things where you're concerned with individual locus of control, things that aren't so necessarily political. I'm wondering, Kathleen, if you've come across this, whether in academic literature or like professional bodies or any of that kind of stuff, seeing liberation and decolonial psychologies kind of pop up a little bit more.
I think I've seen it more on the EAP side and the trainings that are being done with CEs, if that's what you're suggesting. And it's a very, I don't know, I just feel like it's a lot of gaslighting.
Do you
Yeah,
think, Katie?
I,
Do you think this way of thinking is more prevalent in a younger crowd?
to a
For,
certain
for
extent, yeah. But I think it's just amongst the radicals. So if you've ever heard of woke 2.0, like this is
Mhm.
basically the next stage of woke. So if woke 1.0 was critical race theory, maybe some of the queer theory, that kind of stuff, this is putting, turbochargers on it and making it a lot more like focused on economics and things that are a little bit more material, and therefore a little bit more aligned with, frankly, political violence.
So colonialization being weaponized is what it sounds like to me. I mean,
Yeah.
colonialization is part of our history, world history. You know, the British went into India, the British went into Africa, the British are everywhere. Well, after World War II, that came to a close, but and nobody talks about colonialization anymore until recently. So, is the left weaponizing that concept? You said locus of control a minute ago, and bingo, what they're doing, it sounds to my ears, it sounds like they're coming up with yet another way to demonize Western therapy, which is all about let's talk about you and get to the root of your issues. This is a method where they can say, well, you know what? Let's blame it on somebody else.
Yeah, I think it fits broadly in this kind of social justice genre of therapy, that is basically focused on the political and just overthrowing systems of oppression rather than taking responsibility for yourself. In this case, I think it's just kind of turned up to the max, if that makes sense. So it's,
Mm.
if you think about woke 1.0 with critical race theory and being very focused on things like race or, gender identity of that nature, this is, class, like kind of like OG original kind of Marxism in that kind of sense, and being really focused on the material elements of that.
Mm. So
what do you think the purpose of this 2.0 is? What do you think is behind this motion, if you
what's the
will?
goal? What's the
Yeah,
goal?
what's the end goal here?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's twofold. One is fundamentally transforming what therapy is, so what it means to be mentally healthy and what it means to, support or practice psychotherapy towards the ends of mental health. And then B, I mean, I think frankly, it's just kind of a stochastic terrorism in the sense of, if you deploy this deranging way of thinking upon enough people, at least some proportion of them are going to take that in, a dangerous direction. So I think it's a little bit of a, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a fracturing tool or something to kind of destabilize our society.
Mhm. Which goes right back to the main premise, which is oppressor and oppressed, right? How do we divide and fracture?
Hmm.
I don't remember if it was Ryan or somebody else. It was some grad student that we've talked to, um, said that one of their professors, first semester, first week, said that out loud to the class that their goal was to burn it down, and referring to the profession, to burn it down and rebuild. And they're not shy about saying it.
Yeah, it's fundamentally it's the word I'm looking for, like a solvent, like a solvent. So trying to destroy things
Mhm.
in a way where it doesn't matter. In fact, they would consider it to be fascistic to articulate what you would want. It's only saying what you don't want. It's like really the essence of critical theory is, using the ideal to criticize reality without any necessarily like end goal. It's just kind of destruction for the sake of destruction.
Sounds like a girlfriend I had in high school. Anyway, all right. All right. What were you going to say, Kathleen?
Well, I kind of lost it, my thing here, but the end goal is to dehumanize people or not think for themselves. What is the actual indoctrination piece of this 2.0 thing? Is it to indoctrinate, let's say, the client or the patient, whatever you want to call your client or patient, into thinking that they're helpless? or they're, I mean, walk me through that for a second.
Yeah, so the end goal is called conscientization. Another term for it is critical consciousness. You'll see this in the literature a lot. It's a way of thinking. So I think, like, I understand what you mean by indoctrination. I think I use the word derangement specifically because it's less of a doctrine and it's more of just kind of a general way of thinking that's detached from reality. And so you can switch out the details of the doctrine at any point. It's more so the way of thinking that's, resentful, bitter, things of that nature. I mean, I know, Philip, you made that joke about, your, your girlfriend or whatever, but I think it's kind of like a cluster B ideology, if that makes sense. So it's taking these kind of cluster B ways of being and turning it into, like kind of an ideology or like a practice in that kind of sense. So I do think that's the ultimate goal, is to conscientize people, basically becoming a communist. So having that communist consciousness.
Mm. Wow.
Well, that's depressing.
It is. It's how do
How
you
in the world
how do you bring
have
mental
we
health
gotten
about?
there?
How do you bring mental health to a person by refusing to help them, but instead blaming their problems on somebody else? Where does that end?
Mhm. Yeah, and I mean, it ultimately, it's going to end in violence. I mean, I think that's just kind of a
Mm-hmm.
fact of life when you breed that kind of resentment for people and you start, it's this person's fault, it's that class of people's fault. It's just kind of where it ends. And this is why I think this is so important to me, is that it truly is evil. Like, it's not okay. There are fiduciary responsibilities that therapists have that this absolutely violates, and I don't think this is appropriate at all to be in any sort of professional therapeutic context.
Agreed.
I was not taught that at all. And so your point, Katie, is that helps explain that the newer generation of mental health professionals are not what we were back in the day. And so I think what your point is their training is in that Marxist genre, and I'm we're seeing it, but they're not calling it Marxist. They're calling it, whatever word they want to, but it really does put the client probably more at risk now. And it's,
Absolutely.
walk me through that. Like, what are you seeing?
Yeah, so I mean, in the sense of how people are trained, I mean, I think the curriculum has Marxist elements for counseling specifically under K-CREP. There's social and cultural diversity, and pretty much all of that is intersectionality in various forms of neo-Marxism, queer theory, all of that kind of stuff. You also have social, I think it's like multicultural and social justice competencies that the ACA has endorsed that include things like raising people's critical consciousness. Um, Either having people learn or unlearn their systems of or their perceptions of being an oppressor and oppressed, so basically becoming woke. It's in our ACA ethics. So most states, I think maybe all states, whether implicitly or like officially, use the ACA ethics to arbitrate things, and there are social justice elements within that. So it's so embedded into the profession at this point that I think the average clinician, if they've come up within the past maybe 10 years, truly has no idea that it has ever really been anything different.
What percentage of your graduating class, your cohort, do you think bought into this hook, line, and sinker?
Oh gosh. If you had asked me a couple years ago, I would have said something like 75%. I'm looking back now with a little bit more clarity and realizing that it was probably something closer to like 25 to 30, but it was so dominated by that 25 to 30% that everyone basically kept their mouths shut, which is, I mean, frankly, is what I did. And I do have regrets about that. But so proportionally, I think it's not a huge amount of people. And this is one of those things that gets really complicated because you have normal people who don't necessarily know what social justice means in its more like specific sense. And so they'll use these terms or endorse these practices while being relatively sane. Meanwhile, you've got, that's providing cover for really serious and insane radicals to do, like functionally seditious and really dark things. So it creates a situation where all you need is like 20% of people doing dangerous things under the cover of a lot of people who just are maybe a little bit naive.
Yeah. So you?
Wondering, I mean, this is maybe a sidebar, Katie, but when you think of like uh, American Counseling Association, there are many faith-based counselors as members of this particular group. And there's also, I would say, a large percentage of just conservative counselors, and yet they don't know that this is going on somehow.
Or
Mhm.
choose to ignore it.
Or, well, I don't know if they're ignoring it. I think they probably don't know
Mm-hmm.
what this association has been all about from the get-go.
Mhm. Yeah.
So go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, well, some of this it's downstream from Latin American liberation theology, so it's very easy to put Christian language and coding on it and convince people, that it's Christian. And I think it's worth noting too that, a lot of faith-based or Christian conservative schools are K-Prep accredited, and in order to be K-Prep accredited, they have to abide by these things. And I think it's pretty dark when you're kind of selling out in that way, putting a little bit of a Christian veneer on top of things because you want that K-Prep accreditation because frankly, a huge moneymaker.
Yeah, it's pretty easy to fool the masses. All you have to do is put enough lipstick on this pig and call her Miss America, and people just eat it up. So how did you escape this? How did you get through grad school and not drink the Kool-Aid?
Yeah,
This is where you get to say nice things about your parents, Katie.
yeah, it was hard. Like I look back and that was a very difficult time for me because I didn't know about any of this stuff. So not only was I, I hate to use the word waking up, but in the sense of like learning about these things and trying to understand what's going on around me, but also feeling very isolated. So there's a lot of internal struggle for me at this time. I thought about leaving. I wasn't necessarily planning on finishing my program. I'm glad that I did. I'm glad that I got licensed, but I was seriously considering not doing it. But for me, it was, doing something. So I started The Kids Are Not All Right, which is what I publish under when I was in grad school. I started it in 2022. At that time, I was just using, just under that name without using my full name, just because I wanted to graduate and I didn't want to get kicked out. And again, I'm grateful that I did that, but I recognized the impact that it had on my soul to have that kind of like hidden part of myself. So that's basically what I did, is just do something.
Isn't that something, Kathleen? You get kicked out of a university for having an original thought or your own thought.
Well, your own thought.
Jeepers.
I know. It wasn't like that.
All right, your point number 2 says the betrayal of our professional bodies, the therapy professions, and the transition to the 4IR well-being economy. So let's parse that into 2 segments. Kathleen and I are of the opinion that the professional organizations are so far off the rails and so embedded in what they've been touting for the last, pick a number, 10, 20 years, that they can't go back. That's our thinking. What are your particular thoughts on the professional orgs and what they're doing?
Yeah, so obviously I have a limited amount of firsthand knowledge in the sense that I haven't been in this profession for a long time to be able to witness how it's evolved. But as far as I can tell, it's been a problem since at least, maybe like the 90s, 2000s is when things seem to kind of take a little bit of a shift. I've seen, I think it was 1999 where I saw the ACA endorsing the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. So, it's not new basically, but I do think it's long past saving. I mean, I think at this point, we probably need to investigate the professional bodies for, serious crimes. We need to stop having, the ACA, the MBCC, and the associated exams and all those different kinds of things be the metric through which we're, doing our licensed profession. Because as far as I understand, virtually every state, red or blue, is using ACA, MBCC, all these different kinds of things, KCREP. And I think untethering ourselves from that is a really important step.
Wow. Are you, you're absolutely right. about the accrediting organizations, and everybody's in bed with each other and so forth. There's a lot of money in there. Are you aware of the executive order that's in progress right now?
I think I
14279.
saw. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
14279, having to do with cleaning up the accrediting organizations, who are the first domino in the series.
Yeah.
What do you know?
Would you mind speaking a little bit more to that? I think I saw your post.
Yes, yes, yes. Well, good. Um, that's one reader, Kathleen. So, yeah, Executive Order 14279, link in the show notes, is about it's the Trump administration's effort through executive order, through the Department of Education, to clean up the problem, remove the woke, get the DEI out, however you want to phrase it, get this wrong thinking out of the accrediting organizations, including KCRAP. And this started back in, I think it was February or April of last year. There have been several week-long meetings that concluded in the month of May of this year, 26. And in November, the final report of here's what's going to happen and here's what we're going to do, that we as the Department of Education, in order to clean up the accrediting organizations. Some of the things that were mandated by the executive order to be done, there's no thinking about it. This is going to happen. And then you guys need to do some serious additional thinking. Let me know in November what we're going to do and then get it done. Well, some of those mandated things, the accrediting organizations have already begun to implement. They see the writing on the wall. So when the accrediting organizations' requirements for universities change, then the universities will have to comply. And at the same time, the various states, we're speaking about Texas here, but there are others that have put up this bulwark of legislation or code, new law that says what you want to be a university in Texas, you want to be an accrediting organization doing business in Texas, you must be this tall to get on this ride. You got to abide by this. So between the federal and the state and public grassroots opinion, there's going to be some changes coming. So this is all very, very good. But I'm glad to hear you speaking to the need for change.
There has been some movement at the college level, Philip, here in Texas because of that. And sometimes you'll see on social media or Telegram or whatever social media platform that students are starting to report these illegal continuance of DEI stuff, and the state is coming down pretty hard on the university as a whole. So, we're seeing that here in Texas. So,
Yeah.
it's gonna hopefully it'll happen a little bit faster than.
Yeah, well, all this stuff takes time, and Katie knows this. This whole cultural Marxism, which is the major categorical name for what we're dealing with here, by its 687 different confusing names, this started 170 years ago, 1850. We're not going to fix it in 6 months. This is going to take a minute. And Texas passed laws in the last two sessions. We meet every 2 years, that removed DEI from the administrative portion of the universities. Get DEI out of HR, essentially. Well, what it didn't do was remove the DEI curriculum. So, the administration is supposed to be clean. Now, we know that we're not stupid enough to think some of them just change the name, go underground, and they're dumb enough to admit it on video. Hello, AG, we're over here. And so what about the curriculum? We got to clean up the curriculum. Well, that's happening from the federal level as well. And there's stuff going on at state level. New session coming up early next year. So you clean up the accrediting organizations. You add state law, as I said a minute ago. You hit them from all sides. Grassroots speak up. We're sick and tired of this stuff. If we all stood up at the same time and said enough, we could change this by next weekend. So that's what's going on. So there is change happening. Just because you can't see the duck paddling for his life, his feet are going 100 miles an hour. Just because you're just looking at the top and saying, somebody says, I don't see any change, doesn't mean change isn't happening. It means you can't see it because you haven't looked for it. So, any other thoughts on the professional organizations? What do you think needs to? Well, you mentioned they need to be investigated. Do we just drop them all together and start all over with new professional organizations, or what do you think?
Yeah, I've struggled a lot with this because I think we might even have to drop the professions entirely and have some sort of like professional psychotherapy profession, with first principles tied to the Constitution, potentially going around the universities and accreditation entirely, like something really novel. Um, I struggle to imagine how to clean up things at this point now that we've allowed so many radicals through the gates. So they're not going to go down without a fight. I'm really grateful to hear of all of the progress. I'm so grateful for the Trump administration. But I do think that, they're not going to go just away. It's not going to be an easy process. They'll either, start being a little bit more subversive. They're going to fight all of these different kinds of things. So it's not going to be an easy process. And I do think, like, over the long term, we really need to think about what it is that led us into this position in the first place. Like, what are those defenses that we didn't have that allowed us to get taken over by this? And what do we need to build up over the long term to prevent this from happening again? Because I do think, you said 1850. I think this is kind of fundamentally like a disposition of humanity. It's kind of like the spirit of Cain in that kind of sense. It's like very bitter and resentful. And so I don't think we'll ever get rid of it. So it's one of those things that we're always going to have long-term defenses against. And because of the nature of our profession, where we have private access to people, it's going to be a target for anyone with nefarious purposes, just because of the access that you have to vulnerable people. So yeah, just I think over the long term, that's really what we need to focus on, is building up those defenses. And then, you kind of mentioned like people feeling there's no change, like really important not to get demoralized. So even if there are setbacks, you just got to keep going.
Somebody's been reading her Bible and understands it. I like that. All right. So what is 4IR? You mentioned in the second half of this phrase, the transition to the 4IR well-being economy. Let's do some definitions first. What is 4IR?
Yeah, so this is a really big topic, but I do think it's really important. So the fourth industrial revolution, I think broadly, so at a surface level, it's just this transition, the social, economic, cultural transition led or brought upon by these huge technological changes. So AI, robotics, all those different kinds of like rapid technological advancements that we're experiencing are shifting life in dramatic ways. So that's kind of the surface level thing. But, at a deeper level, I think that there's, or maybe even a higher level if you want to go that direction, but like a meta system change. So it's how we understand what a nation state is. Does a nation state exist? How we understand sovereignty, individual sovereignty, what it means to be a human person, what, rights that we have, like all of these different, very important kind of like meta ideas of religion and culture and all those different kinds of things being transformed into a new way of being. I think it's helpful to understand that I think at its core, communism is like a social eugenics or like a spiritual eugenics program. Like at its core, it's trying to change the nature of man to be a social being. And because that's obviously not possible, this is going to run up against reality and probably be a little bit disastrous. So the fourth industrial revolution is basically both of those things. You have the surface level thing of just this kind of transition with technology, and then you have this higher level thing of trying to change, governance and religion and belief and all of these different kinds of things to try to change the nature of man at the same time.
It's the Industrial Revolution 4.0. It's the application of all of the stuff in that fourth revolution that we're, AI, all the biological stuff that we can do, genetic, this, that, and the other. It's all of that stuff, plus everything from the first three revolutions, industrial revolutions. And you take all of that and apply it to changing the world. That's what I heard you say.
Yeah, essentially, and changing the world and changing man. So I think like one of the foundational things to understand with communists is that they believe that you do praxis, you act upon the world And then the world therefore comes back and acts upon man. And it's like this cycle of transforming man to become closer and closer to this understanding of like a species or social being. So they truly believe that your economic, your social, your cultural conditions make who we are at like a fundamental level. And so like this kind of interplay is really important to them. So they believe that if they can, this is like social credit. A huge part of social credit is not just, controlling what people do, but it's the belief that by controlling what people do, you'll fundamentally change the nature of man.
And they don't have any choice over that.
Yeah, yeah. And so it's very concerning. With respect to counseling, I mean, and just mental health in general, a lot of this is tied up with the concept of well-being, which is very vague. And it's basically using a lot of measurement and data. So there's a lot of basically like psychological data tied up in what is perceived as success in the fourth industrial revolution. So being able to have a ton of psychological data on people, how they're doing, what they care about, all these different kinds of things, it's really important as a part of this, kind of remaking man and remaking society process. So that's where like counseling and mental health in general come in, because we have that access. We're doing notes. A lot of people are using these big platforms and they're getting transcripts, for example. I mean, I think simple practice is recording. They're taking transcripts and what's the word? It's not de-aggregating, but like basically de-identifying and then aggregating the data. So it's not identified with the person, but you have a tremendous amount of psychological data just from this kind of like broader, like this host of information from people in their therapy sessions.
They're compiling data without names.
Yeah. And so even if it's not, violating HIPAA, you can still do a lot with, broad scale societal data.
Mm-hmm. And how is the permission? How do they gain permission to do that?
Yeah. So like, you mean like for simple practice or?
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think as far as I understand, people just tell their clients, I'm, going to use AI. Is that okay to listen to our sessions and do the notes? I think it's pretty mainstream and normalized now. I can't fathom doing it, but it's pretty normal now. I'm curious, Kathleen, since you've been in this field for so long, your thoughts there.
Yeah, it's very well. Our walk-in door has, power down all your cell phones, because that's another mechanism too. But it chills me to no end that counselors think that this AI stuff, however it's marketed, to counselors and making it easy and all that kind of stuff. This is very troublesome and problematic for me personally. I will never do that at all. And I don't understand why part of my job is to write my own notes and compose my own assessment and make critical thinking of treatment plans and so forth and so on. So, I even like if AI is creating a treatment plan, that's worrisome to me, because it's taking the human connection out of the equation 100%. And so what do we do? We might as well just have do therapy with an AI, and that's happening now. People are signing up to actually have a counseling session with some, Avery on the other end, and that's totally AI generated. I mean, we're talking about a form of transhumanism here.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you can't convince me that these clients know that their stuff is being taken and utilized in some fashion. If you told me, if I walked into your office, either one of it, and you said, Philip, I want to record this session using AI, and then it's going to take your information and write the notes for me, and it's going to take that same recording, it's going to strip your name out of it, but we're going to send it to the home office where they compile it with everybody else so we can use that data to figure out how to do things different and better. Are you okay with that? I'm not telling you that I'm okay with that. They're not telling people this is going on. A certain percentage of people.
I was going to say that, Philip. I don't think counselors are even getting permission. And this goes back into, you got me riled up now.
Thanks, Katie.
about, the lack of informed consent. Here's what
Yeah.
this means, and sign off on it. I don't think counselors are doing any of that. I mean, there may be a few going, hey, I'm doing AI, blah, 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 and all that kind of stuff, but they're not doing informed consent as to what that means.
Informed consent to most people, to most counselors, is that paperwork in the lobby that only satisfies the lawyers, but informed consent continues until your relationship with these people is done. In fact, that's what our entire conference this year is themed around, is informed consent. Katie, you should come to the conference. I need somebody there that can keep Ryan under control.
Yeah. He'll be in
Help
control.
a brother here.
Katie might help.
Tell you what. Okay, so this wellness, well-being economy, I looked that one up. And my understanding of it is this. I have to turn everything, Katie, into an 8th grade analogy. Okay? I'm not stupid, but it sure helps. The well-being economy is a shift from corporations. Now, this is a problem. Large corporations in America whose main focus, they measure everything they do to maximize profit because they're trying to keep shareholders happy. I get it, at the potential expense of their customers or clients, depending on what industry it is. That can be a problem because greed can get out of hand. All right. The 180 shift is, let's don't measure anything having to do with this corporation anymore. Let's measure the happiness metrics of their customers. All right. Typically, a 180-degree shift doesn't work. It just simply shifts the problems from over here to over here. And if you do nothing but measure, if this well-being economy is a car, the engine that drives it is the corporation that's producing whatever they're doing for the people that are sitting in the car, the clients, the customers. If all we do is measure how happy are these people at the expense of measuring anything to do with what's driving the car, you're going to have a problem. You're neglecting the engine. It's going to break down if you don't measure what's going on and maintain it properly. So I think the answer is somewhere in the middle. Every corporation in America that knows what they're doing needs to pay attention to their customers. And the profit will take care of itself, and the shareholder value will take care of itself. Unfortunately, anyway, that's my take. Punch holes in that.
Yeah, so I think that's roughly correct. I think one of the things that tends to get mixed up in a lot of this kind of stuff is they're usually not rejecting the original thing outright. So they're trying to take the original thing, take little bits and pieces of it, and so instead of rejecting GDP, it's, well, GDP is just one piece of the puzzle, but you also have people, planet, so they call it the triple bottom line: people, planet, profit. And so, you're not getting rid of GDP, but you're just going to, have it just be one metric amongst others. And it's basically a power grab where you can bring in this like political, whatever well-being is, whoever defines well-being and however it's going to be measured, and, bring it in on top of these kinds of things. And, basically like it literally just like a power grab. But in this case, I mean, A, who's measuring well-being? What does that even mean? B, it's not the state's job to provide us well-being. And so this is basically just a shift to, people need housing and food and all of these different quote unquote human rights that are not like rights in the sense of, in the American tradition, are negative rights. So, things that you are protected from having, like impeded, I can't think of the word now, alienated. So, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, property, those kinds of things. You don't have a right to somebody else's labor. So you don't have a right to have food or housing or those kinds of things. You do have the right to try and either succeed or fail. So that can't be interfered with in that kind of sense. And so it shifts the way we understand rights and the way we understand entitlements and things like that, to be all kind of tied up in this like, kind of big matrix of things that only those with the correct understanding of well-being are able to navigate. And then you also have the issue of the fact that like it seems to be almost providing cover for degrowing our economy. So basically, if you're not growing, you're dying. So killing off the West in an economic sense, and having this as like a cover so that it seems okay to people, I guess. Yeah.
So what does the fourth industrial revolution and the well-being economy, how are they related? Is the fourth industrial revolution, that aspect we discussed, is it being used as a tool in the well-being economy?
Yeah, so I think that well-being economy is like a subset of the fourth industrial revolution. So that would be maybe in this
Mm,
kind of like
all right.
economic, social, political domain. It gets a little bit messy because it is very like integralist in the sense of integrating public and private, state and church, like all these different kinds of things to, not have that kind of separation that, we traditionally understand in the United States. And so like I'd say it's like a subset of that. And it also goes by different names. So you'll see it as like the inclusive capitalism or the sustainable economy, the donut economy, the regenerative economy, common good capitalism. Like there's a lot of different branding elements depending on who they're marketing to. But I think the well-being economy is the one that is most accessible to counselors or therapists.
Mm. How do we clean up the therapist roles? We've got 95,000 licensed counselors in Texas. Your guess is as good as mine as to what percentage of them are eat up with this stuff. But let's just say it's 60%. How do we fix them?
Yeah. I mean, I think number one, we need to have explicit fiduciary responsibilities, enumerated in this, like by the states for the professional, regulatory purposes, that there are certain fiduciary obligations that you have in this kind of profession that you have to be able to, almost like an oath. So like taking an oath of office in that kind of sense, but for, this particular profession, because there are public responsibilities as well as, like individual or client-based responsibilities, as well as professional responsibilities in the sense of, um, like doing the work to gatekeep and hold other people within the profession accountable. So having something enumerated like that, I think, could be really important in the sense of like an oath, because those that cannot abide by that oath, for example, those that are practicing any form of Marxist practice or anything like that, it's a fundamental conflict between what they're doing and the oath that they have to be able to abide by, and you could remove them from the position. I think that's entirely reasonable. I know it's a little bit unpopular, but I think that's like one of the best ways that we have is just, we have fiduciary responsibilities. And if you cannot meet those, if there's serious conflicts there, you're not qualified to be in this position of public trust, and you have to be removed. So I think that's reasonable. I think new ethics seems to be the best and probably like the fastest route we can take because it doesn't require a bunch of infrastructure. So offering states alternative ethics that are not ACA or MVCC tied, that could be helpful, especially red states for arbitration, things like that. Let's see. And
All
I do
right.
think, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, hold that thought, because I know what Kathleen's thinking on the subject of, and we're not in disagreement with you. We've just been studying some of this stuff for a while, and there are problems with every solution, even the ones I like. What are you thinking about ethics at the state level, Kathleen?
Well, I don't know.
Besides the fact that we already have codified ethics at the state
Yes,
level.
our rule book is our codified professional conduct manual in the state of Texas. We do not abide. If the state of the 95,000 licensees do not for if they abide by ACA, they're going to get in trouble.
Texas
Because
doesn't recognize ACA's code of ethics.
yeah, it doesn't recognize the actual laws in Texas. So my rule book and the way that I conduct myself is via Texas Behavioral Executive Council and my LPC board and the 145 pages of rules that I have to abide by. That's my professional. That is what you're calling it, Katie, my oath. My oath is that I signed up with the state a long time ago that I will understand the rule book. I understand everything in it. And I am here to, that's my guideline for professional ethics. So now we know that the ethics that are being taught historically have never been about our rule book. It's been what probably what you're talking about, Katie, like the other stuff, and they're calling it ethics. And I think that has been very harmful to all clinicians, licensed clinicians, because they have really gone away from the oath that they signed up for at the state licensing level.
One of this is ultimately a competency issue. It's another way to phrase it, raise the bar of competency. The problem
Well, the competency, Philip, I mean, and Katie, I want you to chime in here. The competency issue is very real. There are incompetent therapists all over, all over.
Would you agree with that, Katie?
Oh, absolutely. And frankly, I think we have a diploma mill problem at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then you combine it with what you're talking about, Katie, and that's why we're in this mess.
The reason that the current laws aren't getting it done is not because we don't have enough laws. It's because one of the basic tenets of Marxism is language and the redefining of everything. There is the state of Texas, and most states do the same thing. They have to have a checklist. The law says you must have a course in this, a course in this, a course in this, a course in this. It's very specific about what the subject matter needs to be. So when you take a transcript and match it up, okay, we got that one checked, we got that one checked, we got that one checked, yay team, this one's good, give her a license. What you didn't see was the fact that the accrediting organization is saying you have to have a course on this, and they may blatantly say, and it must include this and this and this tenet in Marxism. They don't say it that way, but it's almost that blatant. And then the schools have a course called Cognitive Behavioral Therapy and What You Need to Know, which is one of the state requirements. So they're just matching titles, but the content, it's been Trojan horsed. It's been hollowed out, carved out, and we're stuffing that turkey full of Marxist dressing. And you're getting a load of it in school, but the transcript says we checked the box. So we're licensing new social justice warriors is what we're doing. So until we figure out how to fix the language issue, it's just one of the components. But until we figure out a way to stem that problem, and the accrediting organizations get cleaned up. So there's a multifaceted fix to this. There's no one solution that fixes it all. All right. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think, like in the sense of training too, I mentioned the diploma mills. People really have no clue. Like they're doing 8-week asynchronous courses. They're not getting quality supervision. You can just get churned through, and you truly just have no idea what you don't know. And if you don't have supervisors who can help you with that, you can really end up in a position of danger where you just truly don't understand that you're in over your head and that you don't have these foundational skills like informed consent, understanding what that is, all of these really basic things. But I think there's like a formative element, if that makes sense. Like we need like better moral formation, or like something we're lacking in, like a really core defense and like discernment of like what is and isn't true, good from evil, like these really fundamental things. And like I've thought a lot about, what would make a difference in that respect when it comes to training. And like I think sometimes that this would be better off as like a skilled trade field. This is something I've talked about with some people. I understand, the pros and cons there, but I do think with the universities, it's all, you pay the tuition and you're a warm body, you're in. Skilled trade, there's more of an incentive to produce, to have some sort of demonstrable value, especially early on, that I think serves as a little bit more of a filter just for competency, and against, these like ideological or moral issues. So I just think like better moral formation is really important here.
Are you advocating for an alternate route to, let's call it licensure?
Yeah, I mean, my dream, which I understand is not necessarily realistic, but like in, say totally nothing matters and we can just have exactly what I want. Skilled trades, no universities, you're vetted at a very like small, maybe local level. bound by first principles and fiduciary responsibilities. But, other than that, more like or intellectual or more freedom in the broader sense, as long as things are within, you've got a floor and you've got a backbone, and then, freedom within that to disagree and, learn and challenge and things like that. So that's my preference. I don't think we need the universities. I think we need to be licensed. I'm curious your thoughts here, because I know this is a popular area of contention, is whether we should continue to be licensed.
Well, I have seen licensees turn in their license and be a coach because they feel like they're more effective. And I think the whole licensing idea, people are getting mad about, like, well, the coaches need to be licensed. And I'm going, no, they don't need to be licensed. Let the free market bear that. They'll get theirs at the end of the day, good or bad. But I'm almost, I would seriously toy about just being a life coach, and I'd be much more effective, and I don't have to buy into all this stuff that I have to, the trainings that are just full of just brainwashing and, all that kind of stuff. So I don't know what the answer is. I do know that, we're not going to change the curriculum, too much. I mean, in the next couple of years, but I do think that the more that, like you, Katie, and more conversations that, perhaps conservative counselors have with one another and have a voice and push back a little bit. I think that's the answer. I don't think the answer is the curriculum per se, but like when you went through your school, you told yourself that you needed to be quiet, and that's the similar story across the board with conservative therapists or people who don't even agree on everything, but they have to, and their papers have to reflect, the mantra that's being fed. So I think if counselors who really are fed up, they're sick and tired of being treated this way. I am. I know you are, and I know a whole lot of other people. Just speak with your voice, be loud, because people need to hear it. And I think what's happening is the conservative counselors are now being given permission to roar back, and they're doing it, and it's very pleasing to my ears.
That's an interesting question, Katie, because I think that, and Kathleen just gave you the libertarian answer. Leave me alone. Don't license me. I'll rule myself. And that's a wonderful thing. Problem is the outliers, the people that can't or won't. And yes, they'll get in trouble and whatever, but so will their clients. So I'm not convinced that licensing is the problem, because the state's duty is to protect citizens. And that's what licensing is all about. The problem is who we're licensing and what they believe. And that goes right back to the education system and accrediting and so forth. And every professional organizations, the professional organizations aren't licensed. Look what they're doing.
Well,
Licensing. Go ahead.
Go ahead. I think at the end of the day, whether we're credentialed, licensed, or coaching, at the end of the day, your value will be tested by the consumer. So it's going to play out either way. Fortunately in Texas, they don't subscribe to ACA Code of Ethics. They subscribe to the state statutes, and they have their own rule book. And the more you know your rule book, that's it. It's that simple for me personally. And that's not taught in grad school, actually. None of the rule books here in Texas are taught in Texas grad schools. None. And what is being taught? ACA. They're the standard. Well, and look what's happening. So I don't know. I think at the end of the day, I do think poor clinical skill set, the market will flush those people out. And it's happening now. If you look on the Facebook and the social media and all this kind of stuff, there's a very large group on Facebook, and 9 times out of 10, every day, you're going to see an anonymous poster saying, I can't make it. I don't know what I'm doing, or so forth and so on. And they're getting out of the profession. So I think the market's going to play this out for us at the end of the day. It always does. The free market always does that. Now, whether we have a free market in counseling right now, that's another podcast. But, I don't know.
That'd be a short podcast because the answer is no.
No,
not really. All right, we're about out of time, so we're going to save question number 3 for next time, Katie, because that's a whopper, and I want to do that. My last question have you found a campaign manager for your upcoming Senate run?
Oh gosh.
We need brains like yours down there. We need them. All right. Did you know that Kathleen and I have something called the Austin BBQ Club, Austin, state capital of Texas? That's where the boards meet periodically, and we routinely show up and voice our comments whether we need to or not. And it's quite enlightening and eye-opening. Link in the show notes. If anybody listening and you're in Texas, if you'd like to participate, you can drive down there with us. You can meet us there. You can join in by Zoom, and you don't even have to say anything. Just show up and let them know you're watching. And you can do that in any state in the union. You all have a licensing board, and you're all permitted to show up somehow and speak. So follow the model and do so. We also, what do we got coming up in October, Kathleen?
It's like a conference or something.
Yeah, conference. Our 4th annual conference is coming up, October 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. That's the one I'm hoping Katie shows up to. And Ryan will be there.
Ryan will be there. A lot of people will be there.
Yeah. And we have a lot of fun. We've got 3 days of goodness lined up, lots of speakers. The subject matter this year, the theme is, I'm going from memory, is enabling your clients, informing and enabling your clients towards better health, something of that nature. It's all about informed consent on a lot of different levels and a lot of different applications. So, Katie, you get the last word. What do you want a counselor out there to know about some of your favorite topics?
Yeah, well, first, thank you so much for having me. And I just want people to be mindful of what's going on around you, and just talk to people about some of these things. On the topic of grassroots, it really does make a difference just talking to people at your practice, in your consult groups, like all those little things really add up. So I just want to encourage people to do that.
Thank you very much for doing this. I hope we can do it again.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. And thank you for carving out another hour of your week to be with us. We appreciate it. And I need you to be good.